while we wait for everyone to join, we're going to run a very quick poll to give us a sense of who we have joining with us today. Very simple questions, I promise you, nothing to worry about. 2 questions only, multiple choice. The first question is, why are you writing a book, whether that is to share with family and friends, your life story, whether you want to gift a book writing package, or whether you like to share your story with a wider audience, whether that is in a professional context, or you have another story that you feel is important to be shared with a wider audience, or whether you would like to write a book to help promote a business. So that's the first question. And the second question is the stage that you are at with that book. You haven't started, or maybe you have a rough outline completed about your book. Perhaps you've even written a first draft, or you feel your manuscript is completely done. You're just looking for support to print and publish your book. And the reason we ask this is we work with people that are at many different stages and with many different reasons why they're writing their book. So we have a bit of a sense who's in the audience. There's still people joining, but I think we can close the poll.
Okay, let's see. What did we get? Oh, these are interesting.
Great. So about a quarter looking to share their life story with family and friends, another quarter looking to gift, and another about half of the people who voted would like to share their story with a wider audience. And half of people haven't started yet. So that's pretty common. I think most people actually, probably 3/4 haven't started yet when they come to StoryTerrace, and about a quarter of people are in many different stages. So great to have you again. Thank you for joining us today. Today we will be talking to you about StoryTerrace. We are a biography writing service that matches people with a professional writer and to create a book. I am joined by the fantastic Brandy, who is going to introduce herself in a bit. She is an experienced editor with StoryTerrace, but she's also been a ghostwriter herself. So we can talk to her about the different aspects of creating a book with a professional ghostwriter.
Great to be here. Excited to get to talk about this awesome service of writing books for people. So awesome to see everybody rolling in.
So what we'll do is first we'll introduce the people that are on the call, myself and Brandy. We'll talk a bit about StoryTerrace, and then we'll take you through the 7 steps of writing a book with a professional ghostwriter, and we'll leave about half of the time for Q&A. You can start posting questions at any time. We have some staff that is answering some questions directly, but Brandy and I will be taking lots of questions on the call as well. So do find that Q&A feature and drop your questions in at any time. Good. So I think we can go to the next slide. Brandy?
There I am. My name is Brandy Wallner, as Rutger said. I have done a few different things here at StoryTerrace, but my background in writing consists of doing a lot of content writing, specifically for nonprofits. I have done a lot of content writing for different small businesses, but mostly in the nonprofit sector. And then in terms of ghostwriting, I have ghostwritten books for publishing houses like University Press, and then came to StoryTerrace a couple of years ago as a writer, was able to take on some really interesting projects right out of the gate, and just really fell in love with the idea of helping someone bring their story to life. I worked with, people who were older and wanting to leave a legacy for their family and a history for their family to be able to treasure and look back on. And I remember my very first project, just sitting down with the sweetest woman in an assisted living facility, and just really, it's an honor to really walk through someone's life with them who maybe doesn't think their story is that interesting, but when you sit down and start asking questions, it is phenomenally interesting. And then just back in, gosh, it's been almost a year now. I started with StoryTerrace as a project editor, and in that year have taken on many projects. We're probably into the 80s at this point, and so it's been really an adventure to get to help people bring their stories to life.
Great. Well, we're going to tap into all of that experience, both in taking the audience through the process, but also when we get lots of detailed questions, I have no doubts. Good. Then my background, before starting StoryTerrace, I was actually in management consulting and in private equity. I had very little to do with book publishing, but I had always regretted not recording my grandparents' life stories. My grandfather, he was a great storyteller, and he would talk to me about the Second World War, where he started a small resistance group in the southwest of the Netherlands, but also how he met my grandmother and moved to the Caribbean to start a doctor's practice there, how he played sports, how they traveled. And those stories really fascinated me. But when he passed away, they faded much quicker than I expected. My grandmother, at the same time, she wasn't as much a talker about her life, and she lost a lot of family in the war, so it was difficult for her to talk about her past. But when she passed away, I still regretted that I never asked the questions that I wanted to ask her. So from very different angles, I thought about why, as a society, advanced society, why do we lose the stories of the people we care about the most? And how can I solve that problem? I had different ideas, but none of them seemed scalable until I realized that so many great journalists and authors have become freelance due to the changes in media, but also due to the changes that the internet brought in terms of personalized printing. I thought there was an opportunity to start matching people with a professional writer that really fits their needs, and that way solve this problem for once and for all. It's been a little while since then. If we can go to the next slide. But by now we're mainly active in the UK and in the US. We do work with English language clients all over the world, but we're mainly active in the UK and the US. We have over 20 in-house editorial staff like Brandy. We work with 600 vetted ghostwriters. So all of our ghostwriters go through a process where we check their work, we interview them, we make sure that they're the right fit for our clients. We make sure that we have a pool where we can meet people's different needs, and we'll talk about that later on, so that we can really match someone with the right writer. We've now done over 4,000 books. I'm really proud of that. We also have a beautiful online platform which really helps that collaboration between authors, sometimes some family members that are involved, writer, editor, proofreader, as well as creating the book and making sure that the photos are in the right place. That's all happening in a very user-friendly platform. We work with fixed packages with very transparent prices. I say that because web was one of the things that I really wanted to create when I started StoryTerrace. Most people have never created a book in their life. It's a bit of a opaque process for people, and I wanted to make it really clear what we do and what the output is, and what you get for your money. So yeah, that's why that's a highlight in here. So now on to how to work with a ghostwriter. And one of the most important things, and this is something people sometimes actually skip in their own mind, is to establish their goals. And they skip that because they have a sense of it. But I think the most important thing about establishing your goals is to also be able to verbalize that, because otherwise your writer, your editor will not be aware of that. And of course, that's something that we help people with. Brandy, I mean, what kind of different goals have you seen that people have, and what are some of the pitfalls in this area?
Yeah, I mean, people come to us with a variety of reasons why they want to write a book. Some people come to us, and many do come to us wanting to write a book for their family. They're getting on in years and they want to leave something for their family. Perhaps it's even been gifted to them by a family member. And then some people come to us wanting to explore a specific topic, be that something that's business related. Maybe they're writing a book about their business and want to help kind of mold and shape the next generation of people who are in that industry. And then we have people who come to us even with, sort of therapeutic or cathartic reasons, where maybe they've been through some type of trauma and they are writing about that in order to process through it themselves, but maybe also to help other people who have lived through similar situations. So it really runs the gamut of, the types of projects that we work on. I think one of the first things, when you talk to a project editor like myself, that intro call is going to be about going over, what are your goals? Who is your audience? I tend to ask pretty upfront, quickly, because I think it matters in, it's one thing to write a book for your family. It's another thing to write a book that perhaps you might want to self-publish one day. And, we're going to, I know, talk about that a little bit later, but that matters in terms of the types of ways that we're going to talk about something, and whether we're going to give more attention to steps and breaking things down and formatting and what that might look like if we're doing more of a self-help sort of self-publishing manuscript. So it's important to establish those goals from the beginning, and it also helps us to look for a great writer for you when we know what your goals are, because we're going to be looking for people with similar interests to you, or a specific background that you're looking for.
Great. Yeah, and I guess the other element of that is timing. Sometimes we have people who want to finish a book for a specific time frame, so that we can also put that into your project plan and make that happen. And what I always find interesting is that even, when we talk about, I want to do this for my family, the way you write for, let's say, your children and grandchildren, it's quite different if you are doing it for a much wider, maybe, globally dispersed family, just the level of detail that you require in terms of certain elements. Good. So that's the goals. And then one of the most important things I personally think we do at StoryTerrace, and that I hope we do really well, is matching people with the right writer. So, I mean, Brandy, what are the things that we look at StoryTerrace when we do that?
Yeah, this has become one of my most favorite parts of the job, is to be sort of a writer and client matchmaker. You're looking for, when I talk to someone, so it goes back a little bit to the last slide when we were talking about your goals, right? So when you tell me, I am gifting this book, let's say, to my grandmother, who perhaps is struggling to recall certain memories, or perhaps she is a little bit shy. I'm then going into my Rolodex of, who are writers that I know who have worked with clients like this in the past, who I know are really great at breaking the ice with people and building rapport, and are going to make someone who might be a little bit hesitant feel very comfortable, and feel like they can share. Our writers are very skilled at not only asking good questions, but also just putting people at ease who may feel a little bit like, I don't know even what to talk about, right? Because sometimes that's the case. Sometimes, like I mentioned before, we have clients who don't even think they have a very interesting story. And so our writers are great at drawing those stories out. And so I'm looking at things like educational background. I'm looking at different hobbies and interests that writer has, different passions of theirs, in order to match them with the client and what their interests and passions are.
Great, thanks, Brenda. Yeah, we do keep a very long list, and it's one of the reasons why we interview all of our writers about their professional background, their interests, but also their character, because we know that character matches are also really important to have an enjoyable experience and to create the best book possible. Right. Great. And then getting the most out of your interviews. That's a question I always get, like, how do I get the most out of my interviews? And what are some of the tips that you tend to give both to clients as well as writers?
Yeah, we have, clients come to us in a variety of ways. So we have some clients who come and they have, like many of you may be on the call, they've thought about their book for a long time. And so they maybe already have ideas of things they want to include. We've got clients who they've gone as far as to make a list of things that they want to talk about. But one of the things that I encourage my clients to do is to leave room for the unexpected questions, leave room for the writer to do what they do best, which is to ask questions that maybe the client hasn't even thought to entertain, right? And so I always advise my customers to, yes, come prepared, but also come expecting it to be a conversation, as opposed to you just, peppering information along the way. I think the other thing is we have this questionnaire that we use, and it's very effective, I think, especially for clients who aren't sure what they want to talk about. Right at the beginning, after the introductory call with the project editor, you're going to get access to our app that we use. And in that app, there is a questionnaire, and that questionnaire is going to help you think through some of those stories that you might want to include. And also gives your writers just a great jumping off point, like some great background and context, so that when they sit down with you for the first time, they can ask really great questions right out of the gate.
Yeah, no, the questionnaire is really helpful. And I know some people fill it out in great detail and some don't. What we always say at StoryTerrace, as long as you read it, it really helps, because it gets you to start thinking about your book and to also remember things, because that's how the questionnaire is designed. We also have some other tips that are in the questionnaire when you feel like you want to try to remember everything, like looking at old photos, calling an old friend. Yeah. Reading a favorite book from a long time ago. We do have some of these tips to help you get into a certain era that you think is important in your life. And so as a writer, when you either come into someone's home or you have a video call or a phone call to have a conversation with a client, like, how do you kind of break the ice? I know it's obviously you're going to talk about something that's important, someone's life. You don't know each other that well yet. You've been matched, so hopefully there is a good match. But still, how do you do that?
I think it's a really interesting relationship, the writer-client relationship, because often you end up really bonding. And I think that, while it's a professional relationship, there is a bit of, especially in the beginning, is talking about things that maybe are not necessarily about the book, but getting to know each other from the beginning. So it's just like anyone else you might meet for the first time. It's, what did you do this weekend? Tell me, what's going on? What do you have going on? What are you, if they mention their family, asking questions about their kids. If they're sitting even over Zoom, you can ask to see pictures of people, right? So some of the people that they're talking about, our writers aren't always involved in those later stages of bookmaking. So seeing the pictures and things like that. So it really helps not only the client, but the writer. If, I can say like, hey, let me see, your daughter's third grade picture, because you're talking about that era, and helping me to connect to something in my own life. I think that also goes a long way if the writer is willing to like share a little bit of their own experience, just to help make and build that rapport. And it just makes you human, and I think that the client needs to see you as just a fellow traveler, a fellow human.
Yes. And in the end, we know that our clients really enjoy the interviews or the conversations. Yes. So I think it is something that sometimes seems daunting. We do offer introductory phone calls before the interview starts, because that helps. At least you heard someone's voice, you have connected a little bit, and then it's really about trying to enjoy it. The good thing about writing a book is you can always change anything you've said. It doesn't have to go into the book. Right. It's about being open. You can still change the wording, how you describe someone or something, and I think that's really what makes it such a unique process. Why I always get the question, from people, what if there are things I don't want to talk about in my book?
Yes.
I say, well, I would recommend you to talk about it, and then you can always take it out.
100%.
My experience, people always put more in their book, sometimes to the surprise of their children and grandchildren, than they had intended to before they start the process, because they feel such level of control over how they can bring certain aspects that they don't talk about so easily across.
Yeah, I think that I get that question very often too as a project editor is, I mentioned this, but I'm not sure I want it to be in the book. And yes, that's a-okay. We can, until it goes to print, it's changeable.
Exactly. Good. So that's about the interviews. From there, obviously, there's a whole process, which we've given a very simple picture of someone writing with a pen here. But I mean, what happens after the interviews are finished, Brandy?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I really like about our process is how structured it is, because I think that the writing process can sound like this very nebulous, mysterious sort of thing. And I feel like, especially with customers who, maybe don't have any experience with writing themselves, this is very comforting to see it laid out. So after interviews are complete, the writer will then create an outline and a sample chapter. That outline and sample chapter, that's really the first opportunity that the client will have to see, what's the tone? What kind of words is this writer using? Does it feel reflective of who I am? Does it feel like the way that I would tell a story? Because we are ghostwriters, right? So we are attempting to tell a story in the manner in which the client would tell the story. And so that sample chapter is the first opportunity for you to take a look at that as a client, and then you can offer that feedback. So any feedback, revision requests that you have at that point, you can tell that to the editor, myself, as well as the writer. The writer will make those revisions. Your project editor will go through it. And then after you have, approved the outline and sample, then it goes into full draft. So then your writer will go away for a couple of weeks and write your full first draft for you. Again, you'll get an opportunity to weigh in. Your project editor, myself, will give it what's called a structural edit. And then the proofreaders, who we have a team of that are great, will go through it, looking for all those other typos and grammatical types of things that you often think of. And then the client will get it and be able to offer their feedback. And again, it will go back to the writer. The writer will make those revision requests. So it's a really, it's a step-by-step process. It's very structured, and I love that about it.
Great, Brandy. Yeah, I think in terms of, of all of those steps, that's of course a process where the project editor really makes sure that you always keep moving forward. Can sort of sometimes help to translate what you want, which can be very difficult to express when you're writing a book, and really turn it into something that usually our customers love. And what kind of structures do you tend to see within the book? Are those often thematic, or are those chronological, or what do you see?
Yeah, I mean, it really runs the gamut. We're pretty flexible. Sometimes clients will come to us with a specific idea in their minds. I have a client right now who it's, not our typical, but wanted it to be sort of in this, almost like a script would be written out. And so that's what the writer is doing. And other times what's more typical is a narrative format, like a typical trade book would be. Sometimes, we do also write fiction. So sometimes we're looking at novels. It's really open and flexible. So we do a variety of things. And also it can be first person, third person. We kind of ask that during the process as the interviews are going along. The writer will try and get a sense of how the client might want it written. And then again, when that outline and the sample chapter arrive to you, the writer will say, here's here's what it would sound like in the first person, tell me again, confirm that this is kind of the tone that you want it to be shared in.
Great. Thanks, Brandy. Let's
Yeah.
have a look at, that was obviously the meat of the whole project, is getting the text in shape.
Yeah.
But no book is complete without a beautiful cover. 95% of our books have somewhere between 20 and 40 photos, and having a beautiful design. We have beautiful quotes often at the back cover of our books. And this is all really facilitated through our bookmaker platform, where at any stage in the project, people can upload their photos. It's just a drag and drop. And then once they're there and you get your structure of your book, you can start dragging them into the chapter. And yeah, we think we've made that really, really easy, so we can create really beautiful books. Good. Then in terms of sending your book to print and delivery, obviously once you've approved not just your manuscript, but also the layout, the order of the photos, the captions, the back quote cover that you would like to use, perhaps a dedication. There's a lot of room for flexibility here. Then we send your books to the printer. We print our books standard, hardcover, full color, and we place photos at the end of each chapter, because that's the best reading experience when it comes to writing memoirs or a life story or a biography, where you read about a certain stage in someone's life and then you see a few pictures. But we also create books, some professional books, where we use photo placement, for example, in a different way, or we work with charts, etc. Then lastly, before we go to the Q&A, self-publishing. About 10 to 20% of our clients self-publishes. Self-publishing means Amazon as the big player. I mean, 90% of self-publishing sales come from Amazon, so that's really important. At StoryTerrace, we help to facilitate that, but also we can make sure that books can be available for order, for example, through Barnes & Nobles or Waterstones, and other platforms. We have different packages of self-publishing. So for those people who want their book to be available to anyone, say on Amazon, so they can find support, or when they have a specific interest, we can help with that. Or perhaps you have your own database that you would like to sell the book to, so we can help with that. But we can also help you to advertise on Amazon your book and take that marketing a step further, or do even broader distribution and marketing, where we make sure that you do these things in the right order, the price setting, how you advertise the book, the blurb that you put on Amazon is extremely important, the keywords that you use, both for search and for advertising. So this is sort of the last step for about 20% of our clients. We also create specific commercial covers, which are more professional book covers when it comes to trying to reach the business segment.
These are beautiful covers.
Yes, they're all striking. Good. So that brings us to a very, very quick run through. I've tried to keep it to 30 minutes, because we can obviously talk forever about creating books after we've done a few, but we also have lots of live questions. So I'm going to bring the first one to you, Brandy.
Okay.
This is a question from Harry. Could you please talk about what the benefit is of working with StoryTerrace rather than a private writer?
Well, I think with StoryTerrace, one of the benefits I would see right away is that there's visibility on our end of, we've vetted these writers. The writers are people who have been interviewed by us. We have done some investigation into their writing work. We have samples from them. We've talked to them. So these, you'll be working with a writer who has been vetted by an organization, as opposed to, maybe hiring someone on your own. And then you also have the added benefit of someone, like myself, guiding the process. So, if you would hire a writer on your own, that's wonderful, but you may not always be able to know what's coming next. You know, that with us, there's a structure that we are able to fill you in on. You know what to expect. You know when you should be getting your outline. You know when you should be getting your draft. Everything is on a timeline and a project plan. So I would see that as the really straightforward benefit. Yeah.
So in the end, we do everything from making sure you have the right goals to getting your book either self-published or delivered to your home, and everything in between. And there's quite a lot in that process. We get a lot of clients that have tried to write themselves, or maybe have tried to work with someone. We also have the benefit, and I think there's a question around this from Sharp: what happens if I don't get on with my writer for whatever reason? We've built a process where that comes out very quickly, because we obviously do that matching, and we know the writer, and we try to get to know our clients. There's introductory phone call, and there's just someone there in case there is questions about quality or about speed, rather than having to work with an individual directly. We also, our editors see so many books. They see more books than a ghostwriter does, because they work on many different books at the same time, so they can advise on titles, on the layout of the book, many different aspects than you would get from a single writer.
Right.
And of course, we have writers who get sick, or where something happens in their life. So we are there as a large organization to make sure that your book still comes out on time.
Right. And as a, just to add to that, as a freelance ghostwriter, they may not have access to, the actual publishing piece of the art of making a book. So putting the book together, the actual printing, the binding, getting it out into the world is just another step that, if you're doing it on your own, that you would have to look into and research and do on your own.
Good, Brandy. I'm going to move to the next question. So I was just reading. There's so many questions. Seeing if I can group them a little bit. I have a question from Brian. I've already prepared a first draft of my biography, but on reading it, I find it rather boring. A rather boring manuscript, which could perhaps be better described as a diary. How can storytellers go about making it more lively and a good read?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So sometimes, yes, like yourself, people come to us with something that's either partially written, or they have an idea for it. I think our writers, it comes back to giving that space that I talked about earlier during the interview process. So giving that space for writers to ask questions that maybe you aren't. Our writers are also really great at picking out themes and a through line in a story. So we're not always, I have a friend that puts it this way, like we're not good at like reading our own labels, like we're inside of the body. So on the outside, people can maybe see things that we don't see ourselves, right? And so as they're listening to your story, as they're reading through what you maybe find to be boring, they're picking out the things that are really interesting and weaving them together, and then able to, bring about and tell the story in a way that's more interesting and compelling.
Yeah, I think you're talking about labels. I always think about the helicopter view, which is really difficult to do about your own life, because it's really difficult there's so many details and things, and you remember something and you want to put it in, and you want to do justice to everyone that you've ever met in your life, and it can be extremely overwhelming.
It goes back to those initial goals too, right? So what the goals that you set forth, like a writer is going to be able to help you choose what are the stories that actually meet those goals. Because not everything that we want to include, not everything that happens to us in our lives meets the goals that we've set forth in the beginning.
Great. I have a question from Key. Could the book also be an informative product, for example, about current indigenous social issues, on tribal reservation, just anything that's not a story about yourself?
Yes, absolutely. We have lots of clients who are writing topical manuscripts. Yes. I've got one right now who's, writing about his experience in aerospace, right? It's very niche. So absolutely.
And this is also where, if you want to self-publish, our support comes in, is making sure that you are in a specific category in Amazon where people are looking for these kind of books, where it's a good fit, that the blurb that's written and the cover is reflecting what audience that you are trying to reach. Speaking of covers, Eleni asks, can we design our own cover?
Yeah, so the Bookmaker, which you mentioned just a little bit ago, Rutger, is the platform that we use your whole book comes together there. So that's where you will see, as a client, you'll see your outline and your sample chapter there. You will see your draft there. And what you'll also see is that we have a myriad of beautiful cover designs that you can choose from and customize with different, colors and fonts and where the title lives on the cover, and upload whatever photo you'd like. So absolutely, yes.
Yeah, and I think that there's the question that also maybe relates to covers and design, which is about creating a book. To publish it commercially, it's a question from Raymond about the path that takes. I mean, what we do, Raymond, is we start with a strategy session when people want to publish their book commercially, which was with our publishing expert at StoryTerrace, who is not the writer nor the editor of the project. And that person will make sure that the strategy, the audience are clear in mind with the audience that you're trying to reach. From there, we go into the process, of course, of matching you with a writer who's experienced in the area and those type of books. We go through that process, and towards the end, when the book is finished, we will have the cover specifically designed with the audience in mind. And from there, we go into the process of making sure that the publishing of it in and of itself is successful, by making sure that you get the right online reviews, that the book is portrayed in the right way, in the right categories, that you're available on multiple platforms, that it's available as an ebook, as a soft cover. We can even do an audio book, but at a minimum as an ebook and an Amazon print on demand soft cover. Good. I'm going to talk about something else. Yeah, let's go back to sort of the content.
Okay.
Where should you start your story? This is a question from Elsie.
Where should you start your story?
Yes. What have you seen? How do people, how do books, where do they start?
Gosh, again, it's always it depends answer. So some folks want to tell, an autobiography from beginning to end, right? They want to talk about their childhood all the way up until where they currently are in life. And that makes sense, that chronological type of thing. Some people are telling a story that is more about a specific event that happened to them, in which case you might be dropping into the middle and perhaps going back in time to build context for that. So to make getting there make sense, sometimes we have to go backwards in order to provide the context for the event that we're explaining. So again, it really depends. Writing is very much an art. And so there's always going to be room for creativity in how we do that. And the writer will always, it's a collaboration. So they're going to talk to you and ask you what you feel like is something that is going to be comfortable for you.
Yeah, and I know a lot of writers use sticky notes. They have different themes and anecdotes that
index cards,
play a critical role. Turning points, and they
Yep.
get moved around in a board, and you
Yep.
get to see sort of the end product of that. But again, like Brandy said, with an opportunity to change that and to give input, it's a collaboration. I have a question from Scott. Scott is purchasing a historic farm, and he wants someone to capture the backstory of the farm from the current owner, who's 82 years old, and use that as part of the marketing for the farm and the winery. This sounds very interesting. I'm already interested, Scott, in the story and in the wine. Is this something you guys do? Yes, we do. We quite recently worked with someone who built a whiskey distillery, and it was well, quite recently, actually, it was a few years ago. He told us his story, he had a very interesting background himself. The location had an interesting background. And now this whiskey is being sold in one of the most luxurious cruises. And in many different places, I come across it. So it is definitely something that we do and that we love doing. And I'm sure we will have lots of writers who will tell us that they're absolute experts in this area because they will want to work on it, and we'll make sure that we pick the ones who are genuinely the right fit and expert fit like that.
Yeah.
I have a question from Rhonda. What if we go over the amount of words or photos that we paid for in the package?
Yeah, this happens. It happens, you know, where you maybe had more to say than you thought that you did, or there's going to need to be, you know, more space for the stories that you want to tell. And so if that happens, you contact your project editor and let them know, hey, I'm going to need some extra words. I will then, or whoever your project editor is, will go in and let you know exactly how much that will be in terms of an upgrade. And they'll process that, and then you'll move forward with however the amount is that you got. So I think that happens quite frequently, especially with photos too. People decide that they need to have more photos from their life because it's very difficult to choose photos sometimes, I think, from a lifetime of, especially now, right? We take so many photos on our phones. Yeah. It's hard to decide.
I think that the starting principle, just to be very clear about that, is we will make the book within the package that you have purchased from us. If you want to expand it, we will always agree that upfront. We will not write a longer manuscript and then charge you for that before that's been agreed. Sometimes clients come to us and they say, I'm not sure how, which package to buy, and they buy a specific package with, at the bottom of their range, but they indicate to us that they're open to having it longer, and they talk to the writer, they discuss which themes, the structure of the book, and a decision is made on the length. So yes, that is a very common process for books to get a bit longer. The length of the interview time seems limited to capture the details of a life story. How about the time allowed for editing, rewriting, etc. from Myla? So on the interview time, so for a book of 20,000 words, we interview for 10 hours. Like, this is really mathematical, works extremely well. The interview hours, when we interview more hours, actually there is too much information and it's not needed. When we do significantly less, we wouldn't, have the depth of understanding of how much we need to write. So we're pretty confident that the hours are right. I just lost the question. Can you put it back for a second? Because I think there was a second element to it. Yes. So that is really right. And interestingly, we've sometimes had writers go to events and interview people for 10-15 minutes, and it's incredible what they can get out, which you don't get when you're talking to someone for 2 hours at a party, just because we create a space where you sit with someone for quite a specific purpose, but all distractions are off. There isn't talking about what we're going to do next week, or still having to buy something. It's really focused conversation, and it goes very deep, and there's a lot of content. It's almost hard to imagine how much a professional writer within an hour can learn about your life. In terms of the time allowed for editing, rewriting, etc., depending on the package, that's more about how many cycles there are. So we don't have specific time frames for that.
Yeah.
So another question from Skype. I struggle with telling my story of childhood neglect and abuse to anyone, but I'm told the story could help others. I understand the ghostwriter isn't a therapist, but how do they handle stories of abuse and violence, generally embarrassing stories to speak about with strangers?
Yeah, it's something that we actually ask our writers about up front. When I'm looking for a writer match, I'm looking for writers who have indicated that those types of stories are things that they're comfortable with. And so it's not something that you as the client have to worry that you are, putting any undue stress on that writer, because the writer has already let us know the types of things that they're comfortable writing about.
Yes, and yeah, I think it goes to some of the earlier points as well. Of course, it's difficult to open up, but we do, match people with someone that they feel comfortable with, and that whole process is designed for anyone, whether they have more extreme things to talk about in their life or less so, to open up and to then stay in control of what that output looks like. The question from Lady Nicia. Can we choose our ghostwriters?
So were you going to say something, Rutger?
No, I was going to throw it at you, but I realized I didn't ask it as a question to you. So
I think I know what the question is. So we have a database that you saw of over 600 writers. We have gotten it down to pretty much a science when it comes to matching the client with the writer. And what happens sometimes when, in the past, when we have allowed customers to, maybe we send them multiple matches, and this is something that we used to do in the past, what can then happen is the client is not necessarily looking with the precise lens that an editor is. And by that, I mean, I have experience with this writer. I know exactly what their background is. I know the types of things that they like to write about. And so I have all that information at my disposal. And so really looking to your project editor to be the expert on that is what I encourage my clients to do, because sometimes more is not better. I think having a specific choice sent your way, it benefits everyone involved for me to send you the best possible choice. And that's what I'm going to do.
Great. And you can browse all our writers on the website, by the way. So if you want to indicate that person looks like a good fit to us, you can discuss that with your editor. So I have a question about the writer levels. So for those people who haven't been on our website, we have 3 different writer levels. We have junior, senior, and premium writers. I mean, what's the difference between the levels? Yes, and how do we choose? The levels of writers.
So our junior level writer is going to have, experience, but probably 3 to 5 years experience at a junior level. They may not have been published in any major publications, but they tend to have, something that you can look up online. Many of them have a website where their work is, and you can take a look at those pieces of work. It may be on a website, it may be on their LinkedIn, things like that. They could have some educational background in writing. Perhaps they have a master's degree in creative writing, something like that. And then you get into our senior writers who typically have been published in perhaps a magazine or periodical of some kind, and more years of experience, obviously. Once you get to the premium level, these are writers who have perhaps been published by major publishing houses that you would be familiar with. They've got the most experience, 5 to 10 years, number of years in writing. And so those are really the kind of different levels that we have.
Great. And then I have a question from Charles. My book will be about my career in technology and as a successful entrepreneur and founder of technology companies over 50 years. I'm sure technology changed a lot in that period. How can I be sure that I'll have a writer who has a technical background? But I think there are 2 elements to that. One, we have a very large pool of writers, but that doesn't always mean that we have the exact right fit for a project. So if we can't make the match at the level where we want to make it, we will recruit outside for specific projects, because there is a very specific technical need, or because it's a specific location combined with a language requirement. For example, we do a lot of interviewing. I'm going a little bit off piece, but it's a question I get a lot. people want someone to be interviewed in a specific language, but still the book written in English, we do that. But anyway, there can be many reasons why we don't have the right writer in our pool. So we can also look outside and make sure that we make the exact right match for that project. And the other thing is that after you start with StoryTerrace, if we don't find the right writer for you, you can always get your deposit back, or at least within, you need to decide within the first 30 days whether you like the writer. But until that time, you can always get your deposit back if you don't think that we can deliver the quality which you're looking for, although I'm pretty convinced that we can. Then I have a question from Caroline. If the book is for an elderly parent, would there be help with the online questionnaire, dragging photos, etc.? Is it best? Well, I'm going to leave the last bit of the question, Brandy. I'm going to leave for you. Is it best to do one parent or as a couple? I'm going to answer the first bit.
Okay.
So there are different ways to help. We actually have sort of an offline support package. Sometimes family members help with some of the technical aspects. We've also had, for example, especially during the pandemic, we've done video calls with elderly clients who had never been on a video call, and we helped them and they quite enjoyed it. Now we do know some people that, for example, the photo uploading, they do need support from family. We also have a service around it, which we call our offline service, where we can get photos being sent in a box to a company who digitizes them. We make sure that they get onto the platform, and we can send, for example, printed manuscripts, so we can do the process more offline, and there's an extra cost for that process. I have yes, now I'm going to the second part of the question, which I was going to ask you, Brandy. Is it best to do one book per parent or create a couples book?
Oh, I don't know that I would have a best. I think that both are equally wonderful. It kind of depends on, if it might be nice as a gift, right? To give to your parents as an anniversary gift or something like that, to do a couples book. However, I have just as many clients who have gifted something just to their dad because they're, they want their dad to tell their story, or just to their mom. It really depends on what it is that you're hoping to get from it as a gift giver. Maybe you want to know more about your parents' background in general before you came to the earth, or you want to give something to them as a couple to just celebrate their life together. There really isn't a best. Both are good. Both are great.
Good. Thanks. Yeah, we do both for sure. I have a question from Kathleen around the copyright. So the copyright can be transferred to clients. We have a very simple form we set that up. You sign it where you take responsibility for if you want to publish it further. We assign you all the copyrights. Until you've signed that document, it's actually it's a private book, because we want to make sure that we only know what you've told in the book is true. So we don't take sort of publishing responsibility for your book if you publish it wider, which is why we have that form around copyrights. And then I have time for only a couple more questions. I'm worried my dad will not want to write a biography. How can I or StoryTerrace help persuade him?
Yeah, I get that pretty often, where maybe someone has purchased a gift for their parent, and the parent is really reluctant. One thing I would say, the first thing that happens is your parent will get a beautiful welcome box. And in that welcome box, there's a lovely pen and a journal. And I think one of the things that I like to advise my customers to do is to take a look at the questionnaire that we have online, and to maybe just help their parent get accustomed to thinking through some of the stories, because I think the hesitancy often comes with like, I just don't know what to talk about. And so I think the more that you get your mom or dad comfortable with talking about themselves, the easier it will be once the time comes to sit down with a writer. And then on top of that, when they have their introductory call with me, I'm doing as much as I can to make them comfortable and to let them know that it's really, they're not alone in feeling a little bit nervous. It's very common. They'll have a lot of fun during the interviews, because it's true. Most of the time when we look at, what was your most enjoyable part of this process, almost, I don't know what the percentage is, Rutger, but it's very high that the client says the interviews were my favorite part, right? They just love it. So
yeah, it's really a beautiful way to reminisce. And it is sometimes hard, I must say, like, one of my parents is like a complete struggle now, even though I started StoryTerrace, because she is a bit afraid to talk about maybe some parts of her life. And it is a serious topic. I think the main thing for my personal advice is to say how important it is to you, rather than to say you're going to enjoy this, so don't worry about it. It's like, it's really important for me, and for, and if other people say that, most people will be willing to do it. Because a lot of times we get the argument, I'm not important enough for a book, although we all know that that isn't the case. So
yeah.
Good. I'm going to have to move towards wrapping up. I have one more question I can attend, and I hope we've answered a lot of your questions directly, otherwise to you in writing. But this is something that we see more often. My father has passed. I have several hours of audio recordings of interviews I did with him regarding his military experience during World War II. Now, how should we proceed from there? So this is whether you have something written or audio tapes or other material, or you have absolutely nothing. We do make books about people who are no longer with us. So we can talk to you in more detail about that process, and we can involve multiple family members or work with one person. Generally, when we have projects where multiple people are involved, we just need to have one lead person who can ultimately make the decision and be sort of the quarterback for us in that. But we will, we can work with many different inputs. I think I'm going to have to wrap up here, Brandy. I know we could have talked about many more things. I know there are more questions as well. So if we can go just quickly back to the presentation. If you still have questions after this, do get in touch with us. You can also schedule a consultation to talk about your specific book that you had in mind. And we can discuss your writer match as part of that as well. And lastly, I want to thank all of you for joining us. I want to thank Brandy for sharing your experience.
Thank you.
Invaluable. You can contact us through email, as you can see here. Give us a call. You'll also receive a further email that you can just reply to in the next 24 hours, I suspect. So there are multiple ways. Many thanks for joining us. At StoryTerrace, our goal is to create a world in which every story is captured. I hope you'll be one of them that gets it done in 2023. Thank you very much.